Mohamedou Ould Slahi was born in Rosso, Mauritania, and detained at numerous CIA black sites in Jordan, Bagram, and once held for 14 years in Guantanamo. Today, I'm going to give you a little bit of a rundown over who Mohamedou Ould Slahi is and what the United States federal government implied what he wasn't. Slahi was actually an exceptional student in high school in Mauritania, received a scholarship from the Karl Duisberg Society to study in West Germany, where he learned an electrical engineering degree from the University of Duisburg. In 1991, Slahi traveled to Afghanistan to join the mujahideen fighting against the Najibullah Communist Central Government. The United States had supported the mujahideen against the Soviet occupation in 1979 through Operation Cyclone and funneled billions of dollars of weapons and aid to the mujahideen, who were called freedom fighters. Most of these men were basically Afghans, and a very few, small percentage, were Arabs. After the Soviet withdrawal in 1989, there was a civil war between Mohammed Najibullah's government and the mujahideen, led by Mohammed Mullah Omar and the Taliban in Pakistan. Slahi trained for several weeks at the Al Farouk training camp near Khost. The training camp was also previously called Jihad Wel Al Farouk, which is in Kandahar. Camp attendees received full arms, small arms training, map reading, orientation, explosives training. It was run by Al Qaeda, one of the many mujahideen groups in the Civil War. However, it wasn't really an Al Qaeda training camp. It was allowed to exist under Afghan rule. At the end of his training in March 1991, he swore bayat to Al Qaeda and was given the kunya, which is a telegram, the name of an adult derived from their oldest child. And he was given the nom de guerre Abu Musab. However, he did not participate in the Civil War, and he returned to Germany. In February of 92, Slahi traveled again to Afghanistan and was assigned to a mortar battery in Gardez, which is the capital of the Paktia province of Afghanistan. 6 weeks later, the Najibullah regime fell and he returned to Germany. Later on, in hearings in Guantanamo, Slahi had stated that he traveled to Afghanistan twice, attended the Al Farouk training camp, and fought against the Afghan central government in 1992, but that he was never an enemy combatant against the United States. In fact, he was fighting on the same side as of the United States, which in 1992 supported the mujahideen fight against the communist government in Afghanistan. Slahi's cousin and former brother-in-law, Mahfouz Ould al-Walid, also known as Abu Hafs al-Mauritania. Before the September 11th attacks of 2001 in the United States, al-Walid was a spiritual advisor to Osama bin Laden, and he was on the Shura Council of al-Qaeda, even headed it. However, 2 months before the attacks, al-Walid, along with several other al-Qaeda members, wrote a letter to bin Laden opposing the planned attacks. Al-Walid left al-Qaeda after the attacks. Meanwhile, while Walid was in the Sudan, where al-Qaeda was based in the mid-1990s, he twice asked Mohamedou Ould Slahi to give him money to his family in Mauritania, about $4,000, in December 1997, and another $4,000 in December of 98. In the 2010 habeas corpus opinion for Slahi, the judge wrote, quote, "The government relies on nothing but Slahi's uncorroborated, coerced statements to conclude that the money transfers were done on behalf and in support of al-Qaeda," end quote. In 1998, Slahi was heard by U.S. intelligence talking to al-Walid on a satellite phone traced to bin Laden. This satellite phone was bought in Long Island in 1996, and the FBI was tracking Khalid Fasil, unrelated to anything relating to al-Qaeda. Was a separate investigation. However, that phone found its way to Tora Bora in Afghanistan, and to bin Laden. And from 1996 to 2000, and 1996 to 1998, the FBI, the NSA had a tap on the line. 9/11 Commission report, based on the interrogations of Ramzi bin al-Shibh, claimed that in 1999, Slahi advised 3 members of the Hamburg cell to travel to Afghanistan to obtain training before waging jihad in Chechnya. However, the Federal District Court in 2010 reviewed Slahi's case against that and found that Slahi provided lodging for 3 men for 1 night at his home in Germany in November of 1999. And one of them was Ramzi bin al-Shibh, and that there was discussion of jihad in Afghanistan. Nothing to do with the Hamburg cell. Later on, he was found innocent of these charges. Slahi moved to Montreal, Quebec, Canada in November of 1999 because German immigration authorities would not extend his visa for residence in Germany. Since he was a hafiz, which is basically a person who has memorized the Quran, he was invited by the imam of a large mosque to lead Ramadan prayers. Ahmed Rassam, who was later caught with explosives crossing the Canadian-U.S. border in December of 1999 as part of the 2000 Millennium attack plot, had attended the same mosque. Since Slahi was known to U.S. intelligence through contact to his cousin al-Walid, he was suspected by then of activating Rassam. These claims were later unfounded. The Canadian Security Intelligence Service put Slahi under surveillance for several weeks but did not find any grounds to arrest him. According to a classified report of German intelligence, quote, there was not only no evidence of any involvement by Ould Slahi in the planning and preparation for the attacks, but also no indication that Rassam and Slahi even knew each other, end quote. Slahi left Canada on January 21st, 2000 to return to Mauritania. During his trip home, Slahi was arrested in Senegal, located in West Africa, at the request of the United States authorities, questioned about the Millennium plot. He was transferred to Mauritania to be interrogated by local authorities and the United States FBI agents. After 3 weeks in custody, during which Slahi was accused of being involved in the Millennium plot, he was released. Later, Slahi worked at various companies in Mauritania as an electrical engineer, starting in May of 2000. After the September 11th attacks, the U.S. renewed scrutiny of everyone involved or having suspected ties to al-Qaeda. And on September 29th, he was again detained by the Mauritanian authorities for questioning. Slahi cooperated with the authorities several more times, and then, for the last time, starting November 20th, 2001. Slahi was thoroughly interrogated by both Mauritanian officials and the FBI for 7 days. Then, the problems really started. The CIA transported him to Jordan using extraordinary rendition. The CIA supervised his interrogation at a Jordanian prison for 8 months. Slahi claims he was tortured and forced to confess to involvement with the Millennium plot. And on July 19, 2002, the CIA transported Slahi to Bagram, Afghanistan, where he was transferred to military custody and held at the detention facility. The U.S. military flew Slahi to Guantanamo Bay detention camp on August 4, 2002. Slahi was assigned detainee ID number 760 and was initially held in Camp Delta. Officials belonging to the CSIS interviewed Slahi in February 2003. He was among 14 men classified as high-value detainees for whom the United States Secretary of Defense Donald Rumsfeld authorized use of what was called extended interrogation methods, led by the SEER program under Bruce Jessen and James Mitchell, which have since then been classified as torture. In January 2003, U.S. military interrogators pressed to make Slahi their second special project, drawing up an interrogation plan that was used against Mohammed al-Qahtani. Qahtani, who was a Saudi citizen, was detained as an al-Qaeda agent for 19 years by the United States Guantanamo Bay detention camps and allegedly tried to enter the United States to take part in the September 11th attacks as the 20th hijacker. According to the FBI, Qahtani arrived in Miami airport and was held due to him not answering basic questions. And Mohammed Atta was allegedly in the parking lot and he drove away. Going back to Slahi, the classified documents show that Slahi was transferred to an isolation cell near the end of May, and abusive interrogation started. He was subjected to extreme cold and noise, extended sleeplessness, forced standing or other postures for extended periods of times, threats against his family, sexual humiliation, and other abuses. In September 2003, Slahi was moved to Camp Echo. Memos summarizing meetings held on October 9, 2003 and February 2, 2004 between General Jeffrey Miller and Vincent Cassard of the International Committee of the Red Cross acknowledged that camp authorities were not permitted the ICRC to have access to Slahi due to military necessity. Lieutenant Colonel V. Stuart Crouch, a Marine Corps lawyer, was appointed as Slahi's prosecutor at Guantanamo. He withdrew from the case in May 2004 after reviewing it in depth. Couch said that he believed that Slahi had blood on his hands, but he could no longer continue the case in good conscience because of the alleged torture, which tainted all confessions Slahi had made. Wouldn't that be for just about everyone at Guantanamo at this point, including the alleged 5 Al-Qaeda, high-level Al-Qaeda operatives involved with their September 11th attacks: Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, Ramzi bin al-Shib, Abdul Aziz Ali, Mustafa al-Stawi. All these 5 would constitute as having forced confessions. Couch said that the evidence is not believable because of the methods used to obtain it and the fact that it has not been independently corroborated. The 5th person is Wali bin Atash. The Wall Street Journal later published a letter that Slahi wrote to his lawyers on November 9, 2006. In the letter, Slahi said that all his confessions of crimes were the result of torture. He laughed at being asked to recount everything that he had said during interrogations, joking that it was like asking Charlie Sheen how many women he had dated. When President Barack Obama assumed office in January of 2009, he repeated his commitment to close Guantanamo. He conveyed the 6-agency task force to review the detainees and recommend those who could be released. In his 2010 report, the Guantanamo Review Task Force recommended Slahi be considered for prosecution in a military commission. The task force recommended that detainees deemed too dangerous to release, but without sufficient evidence for prosecution, receive a periodic review board hearing. In 2013, Slahi was listed as one of 71 detainees eligible for review. And in March 2016, Slahi was granted a hearing before the board in June. Going back just a bit, Slahi was interrogated by the FBI on May 22, 2003. His FBI interrogator warned him that, quote, "This was our last succession. He told me that I was not going to enjoy the time to come," end quote. 3 months later, Defense Secretary Rumsfeld approved the use of enhanced interrogation techniques, which are well known as torture. According to a 2007 Wall Street Journal report, paraphrased an incident described in the 2005 Schmidt-Furlow report, an investigation by the Department of Defense into detainee treatment at Guantanamo, following FBI allegations of torture used by Department of Defense interrogators in the early years of Guantanamo. Quote, July 17, 2003, a masked interrogator told Slahi that he had dreamed of watching detainees dig a grave. The interrogator said he saw a plain pine casket with Mr. Slahi's ID number painted in orange lowered into the ground, end quote. In the summer of 2003, Slahi was repeatedly subjected to the use of an interrogation technique which the Schmidt-Furlow report stated had been prohibited by the Secretary of Defense on December 2nd, 2002. After review of the case, including a habeas corpus proceeding, the U.S. District Court Judge James Robertson granted a writ of habeas corpus in order to Slahi's release on March 22nd, 2010. Robertson's ruling was criticized by several Republican Party politicians, and Slahi was the 34th detainee whose release was ordered by a federal district judge reviewing government materials associated with the habeas petition. The unclassified decision was filed on April 9, 2010, and referring to the government's charges, Slahi gave purposeful and material support to al-Qaeda. Judge Robertson wrote, quote, Slahi may very well have been an al-Qaeda sympathizer, and the evidence does show that he provided some support to al-Qaeda or to people he knew to be al-Qaeda. Such support was sporadic, however, and at the time of his capture, non-existent. In any event, what the standard approved in al-Bihari actually compares is that those who purposely and materially support such forces and hostilities against U.S. coalition partners, the evidence in this record cannot possibly be stretched far enough to fit that test, end quote. The Department of Justice appealed the decision, and oral arguments were heard on September 17, 2010, by a three-judge panel for the United States Court of Appeals for the District of the Columbus Circuit. In oral arguments, Judge David Tatel questioned whether swearing bayat in 1981 is evidence of actions a decade more later against the United States. Tatel noted that when he swore bayat, the United States and al-Qaeda had a common goal. Both the United States and al-Qaeda were opposing a communist government of Afghanistan. On November 5, 2010, the D.C. Court of Appeals vacated the decision and remanded the case to the D.C. District Court for further factual findings based on guidance it had given to the D.C. District Court about review of such habeas corpus cases of detainees. The Circuit Court panel said the following questions need to be answered. Whether Slahi understood that he was referring recruits to work in al-Qaeda's jihad against the United States, what Slahi may have said to bin al-Shib in a discussion of jihad in Afghanistan, whether he had been asked by al-Qaeda to help with communication projects in Afghanistan and elsewhere, whether he remained a trusted member of al-Qaeda up until the time of his capture. The district court never held any hearings after the Court of Appeals decision. However, in 2005, Slahi did write a memoir while being held in detention. This 466-page manuscript was in English, a language Slahi learned at Guantanamo. After litigation and negotiation, the U.S. government declassified the memoir 6 years later, making numerous redactions. Excerpts were published by Slate magazine as a three-part series beginning April 30, 2013. And on May 1, 2013, Slate published a related interview with Colonel Morris Davis, the military's chief prosecutor at Guantanamo, from September 2005 to October 2007. The book, Guantanamo Diary, was published in January 2015. It is the first work by a still imprisoned detainee at Guantanamo and provided details of Slahi's harsh interrogations and torture, including being force-fed seawater, sexually molested, subjected to a mock execution, repeatedly beaten, kicked, and smashed across the face, all spiced with threats that his mother would be brought to Guantanamo and gang raped. It became an international bestseller, and prison officials prevented Slahi from receiving a copy of his published book. Slahi had his first periodic review board review on June 2, 2016. A month later, the board recommended that Slahi be released. And on October 17, 2016, Slahi was finally freed and returned to Mauritania after being detained without charge for over 14 years. CBS News journalist Holly Williams traveled to Mauritania to interview Slahi. CBS News flagship shows 60 Minutes broadcast the story on March 12, 2017. CBS News described it as Slahi's first television interview since his repatriation. And in this interview, Mohamedou said that he wholeheartedly forgave everyone who wronged him during his detention, showing you the moral backbone of a man who was horribly mistreated in the face of alleged justice. However, Slahi's passport had not been returned to him, as was promised during his release. He is not being able to leave Mauritania to treat his health condition or see his newborn son in Germany. On January 29, 2021, the New York Review of Books published an open letter from Slahi and 6 others individuals who were formerly held in Guantanamo to pressure President Biden to close the detention camp. However, no response was forthcoming. Just this year, a movie was released called Mauritanian, which is based on Mohamedou Ould Slahi's life while he was in Guantanamo. An excellent film, which I recommend to everyone. And just goes to show you the inhumane treatment afforded to a man who was innocent of all charges, held without charge, and given no reprieve for 14 years, and still given no justice for the injustices which were visited upon Mohamedou Ould Slahi.